Good afternoon, good morning, depending upon your time zone, and welcome to the Practicing Democracy Voter Education and Engagement Workshop Series. My name is Ellen Knutson. I'm the Program Manager for Practicing Democracy, and I'm very excited for our session today on strengthening campus community voter initiatives. I'm super thrilled that Mary Evans from Middle Tennessee State and Carrie Dillard from James Madison are here with us. But before I turn things over to them, I do want to say just a few words about the series. We're coming to the end of it. After today, there are just two more, and I'll say a little bit about those at the end of the session. But we've had a full series starting back in February, March, and through April, bringing together speakers and projects to stimulate conversation and provide some critical resources so that our campuses can develop that capacity to support a healthy democracy. I'm going to put into chat if you've missed any of the sessions or would like to get caught up. They're all recorded and on our website. I'm going to post into chat where you can find them and also where you can, the website for registering for the final two for this month. And also want to let you all know that in June, in Detroit, it will be the Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement meeting hosted by AASCU in conjunction with NASPA. And there's going to be lots of sessions on voter education and engagement. And so I hope that you all might join us in Detroit as well. I'm popping now the link for the CLDE meeting. But we're here to hear from Mary and Kara, so I'm going to give a very brief introduction to the two of them before I turn things over. Mary Evans is a research professor of history at Middle Tennessee State University and the director of MTSU's American Democracy Project. Her teaching and research has centered on equity, agency, and activism. She's an advocate for full access to the ballot, increasing voter participation, and polling places on campuses, and works to advance student civic empowerment so they can really develop that crucial role as citizens. Carrie Dillard is an assistant professor of the School of Communication Studies at James Madison University and also the associate director for the university's Madison Center for Civic Engagement. She's long worked in university settings and with community organizations to design public engagement processes that help groups address local wicked problems, both face-to-face and online. And with that very brief introduction, I'm going to turn things over to Mary, but also ask all of you to type into chat, who you are, where you're coming from, so we can have that introduction of you as well. Mm-hmm. Mary, the virtual floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Hey, hi there on a Monday here on Earth Day at the end of the semester. I don't know what is the situation at your respective part of the world. I'm looking here at the list that Ellen sent to us, and you're a little bit from all over, although I think looking at what I'm reading, most of you are from universities that are sort of in the middle, the eastern sector of the United States. I'm not really seeing anything here from the West Coast. Does that sound about right? I thought maybe rather than just simply typing in a chat, which I can't talk and read at the same time, I can't pat my head and rub my tummy, maybe it would be really nice if you were to click on participants at the bottom of your screen, and over on the right hand side of your name where it asks for more that you can do, you can rename yourself, and put in your university right by your name so we'll know where you're coming from because I can actually see this multi-faced screen. And also, if you're in a position to be able to turn your screen on, do that so we can actually engage. The reason why I'm going first, and Kara and Ellen are very gracious to let me do that, is that I have a class coming up here in just about 45 minutes. So I'm going to speak first and then skedaddle. So if you've got any questions, please just interrupt me, wave your hand, let me know that you want to be recognized, and we'll just deal with those while we're at them. I was very humbled and grateful that I was asked to speak today. And I don't presume that I have any greater wisdom than you do on any of these subjects. All I'm going to actually do is just share a little bit of what we do at MTSU, and that's Middle Tennessee State University. And I don't know if you know where we are, but we're weirdly enough, we're actually, there's a marker to so indicate we're the geographic center of the state of Tennessee. And we used to be the state capital at one point in time, and we're just a little bit south of Nashville. So the way to get to us is you fly into the Nashville airport, and we're down the road a piece, just by a few minutes. So we're kind of in the greater Middle Tennessee, greater Nashville area. And we have 95 counties in Tennessee, and our students come from all over the state. I'm sure that you have heard in the AASCU universe and just the national universe and the sports universe about University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Um, but MTSU is as big as UTK, if sometimes bigger than. And we actually, get students from every one of our counties. So we are a classic ASCU ADP steward of place at MTSU. And therefore, we have a real responsibility to work with all of our students. Just in the terms of full disclosure, again, sort of trying to find out where you guys are all from. Um, we are from a glaringly neon, brightly red state. And that impacts very strongly what we are able to do in our state. And it also honestly impacts the energy level and the enthusiasm of our students for voting, because a lot of them, throw up their hands and say, the classic response of my vote doesn't count, particularly in an exceedingly red state. We're one of those many blue dots within a red state where students are very active and they care a lot about so many social issues and justice issues. And they often just throw up their hands thinking they have no capability of having an impact. Well, we know that's not true. And we know that were all of our students to vote, we'd really shift the paradigm within the state of Tennessee. So being able to really communicate that and make sure that every one of our 20,000 plus students personally understands that little bit of information, because that's the stuff that engenders their ability to get engaged and become involved. So the topic that we were assigned to discuss has to do with how we're advancing voting processes on our campus, but also how our communities engage within that, and how we engage with our communities in so doing. So Kathy asked me to speak about the Tennessee Campus Democracy Network that we in Tennessee started. You will not find it out of line to know that we started it right as soon after the 2016 presidential election. So that's how old it is, about almost 8 years now. And it was an opportunity that we had to try to have all of our campuses, public and private, and four-year universities, and also our community colleges, to come together under one umbrella and meet and talk about things. And then as we went on, we started meeting in person. Obviously, when COVID hit, we turned to Zoom, and it's turned out that Zoomification is the best deal for us, and that works really well. Tennessee's a long, skinny state. So we have folks over in East Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountains, and then we have folks on the Mississippi Delta down in Memphis. So we have, to drive from one corner of Tennessee to the other is about an 8-hour enterprise, and it takes us a while to get from one side of the state to the other. So we enjoy the possibilities that we can all communicate in this sphere. We do try to meet face to face in person once a year, and we have an annual Tennessee Civic Summit just for colleges and universities across our state. And we've hosted it every university really on campus over the past, I mean, on around the state on the last number of years. Some of the bigger schools obviously take it on because it's a bit of a financial charge to host this summit. But MTSU hosted it this year, and we had people from East and West and all over the state. And what we do is try to empower and energize our students so that they will go back to their respective universities and take that energy back and try to get the work done. So we're working collaboratively is one of the things we do. Not all of our universities are ADP or ASCU schools because obviously we're dealing with community colleges, and we're also dealing with like Vanderbilt and Swanee and Rhodes in the state of Tennessee are all private universities, and they're very much part of our network. So we sort of have to work beyond the ASCU framework in order to make it work for us. I know that Georgia has a strong ADP ASCU cohort that meets in state, specifically with ASCU schools. I know that North Carolina does as well. Do you all want to share about some of your state entities that help your schools stay connected and your students stay connected on these issues? Do you have a state network in your state? I'd love you just to speak up, turn yourself off mute and just blurt out.
If so, I'm not aware of it. So I don't know that I have any contribution to make about that right now.
Well, you're in North Carolina or South Carolina?
I'm in South Carolina.
Yeah, I don't know about South Carolina. I definitely know that North Carolina does. Anybody else? I can tell you, Emily, that the way we did it was we just started doing it. We just started emailing going, Dad gum, we got to find a way to get together and help each other out, or we're never going to make a dent. And our students are going to feel completely powerless without the understanding that they have each other across, the whole geography of the breadth of our state. And it's really been fun for them. Some of the schools work through their SGAs, but that varies enormously if the SGA is really active. But mostly it takes folks like us who were involved either in American Democracy Project framing or some kind of campus civic center, or whether it's through community engagement programming or service learning, experiential learning program. Faculty kind of tend to take the leadership in it, but it's turned out to be a really, really wonderful opportunity for us to move that forward. And when we do, obviously, when we get together in person one time a year, we try to bring in as many state legislators and voting officials. Secretary of State, for instance, tends to want to come to these things and, see the students in person and make the pitch. And they're always making the pitch of helping the students get fully confused about voting so that they are registered where they cannot vote. Again, I don't know where it is in your state, but in our state of Tennessee, with 95 counties, it is very biblical. It's like going back to Bethlehem. You have to be registered in one of those specific 95 counties in order to vote, and then you must vote in that county. So obviously, we have students here in Middle Tennessee who are from Shelby County, which is Memphis, and their mamas and daddies love for them to continue to be registered back in Memphis, which is great. It's except that they don't go back to Memphis to vote, and they don't vote absentee. So we work really hard to try to get them re-registered where they sleep at night, where they park their car, where they put their shoes under the bed Monday through Friday. And that's the big selling point. And then when we meet as a state civic network, our Secretary of State says just the opposite of what we say, because he really wants them to vote back in Shelby County, which means they won't be able to vote, or they won't vote realistically. So we have a little bit of experience to know how that works and what we need to be genuinely advocating for. So those are the types of things we do when we meet together as a statewide network, and we do find that it helps. Another one of our challenges is the fact that 13% now post-COVID of our students are completely and fully online. Again, do you all know what your numbers are for your non-on-campus student body?
I
Nobody?
don't know percentage, but it's not very many. We don't offer very many online programs. It's primarily in person.
How big is your campus? What's your student body at Coastal Carolina, Emily?
It's just over 10,000 students.
Okay. So you're about half our size. We're at about 20,000, but that's a lot, that's a lot of people. And I'm sure that makes for a fairly intimate campus. I hadn't really realized that until recently, because I just looked it up, that our current fully 100% online student body is 13% of the campus. And when I do the arithmetic on that, it tells me a lot of really interesting things. For one thing, I know all of us, even though we haven't seen any Insolve data since our 2020 data, oh well, but we're all trying to get ready and gear up this fall to best and better our 2020 numbers. In the case of MTSU, I can tell you it's one of those embarrassing statistics, but full disclosure, we were in 2016, we had only 45% student voter participation. We busted our rear ends for 2020 and we got that number up to 65%. So because we had a 20% jump in those 4 years, what we're articulating to our students is that we need to jump another 20 points and that we need to be having 85% student participation in this upcoming election. Then when I realized, when I found out from our online services vice president just recently that 13% of our students are not even on campus, that tells me that 87% of our student body is on campus, and we're trying to get our student participation to 85% of the student body. Therefore, effectively, every single solitary one of our students on campus has to be registered and has to vote. So I'm going, yeah. We're going to have to do a lot more when it comes to working with our online students than maybe we have done in the past. So that's helped us set another objective in addition to making it realize that we're closer to wanting to achieve 100% participation of the kids who are actually physically with us. So I know we're kind of all in the boat of trying to meet the May deadline to submit our civic action plans for next year. What kinds of percentage goals do you all have? What are you aiming for? Anybody? Or maybe you don't know.
I think we're looking for like 70%.
Realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were at 58% in the last presidential election. We were 58 or 60. We were thinking about jumping up about 10% with a goal.
Well, that's realistic. I think I have always tried to articulate when I've written these plans that we aim for 100% participation, and then the people at like All In Challenge and whatnot, send back a review that wraps my knuckles and says that's not very realistic. You need to pick a real percentage. So, Deborah, it sounds like you folks have set a smart, hopefully achievable objective, and probably ours is a little pie in the sky, but it's still working with the way we jumped from 16 to 20. So we're kind of saying, okay, we did that. We can do it again, maybe, knock wood. One thing we have that I feel as though our university's been successful at, and doesn't fall under the umbrella of community participation though, so I'm deviating a little bit, but it is that we created honestly, under the umbrella of Indiana University's research program a number of years ago, in which AASCU and ADP sent out an email that went to the presidents and the provosts. So thus it had an impact. And it makes me wonder whether ADP AASCU wants to do that again this year to help support that notion, because the presidents and the provosts listen to you guys. They don't listen to us so much. But it called for ADP universities to sign up to be a part of a study that Indiana University was doing, asking us to put online voter registration as part of course registration. And I guess that sounds basic now. I'm going to guess that the majority of you all already do that. But I can tell you that a few years ago, we had not done it. And it was because of that call to be a part of this research project that our provost said, well, sure, what will that entail? So we had to set all these meetings and sit down with the IT people. And the Secretary of State had created in the state of Tennessee in 2017 an online registration button. But we had, we would just send people to the Secretary of State's website. That's what we did. But because of that Indiana University initiative, we sat down with IT and we talked through the kind of verbal spiel that we give our students when we speak to them one-on-one at voter registration booths. We say, hey, we don't say, are you registered to vote? Because that doesn't work. We start off with, where are you registered to vote? And then they got to actually think, well, I don't know, back home. Well, where is back home? Which county are you in, or which state if it's one of our out-of-state students? And then that opens us and moves us into a conversation about, well, where are you going to be in October when early voting starts, and in November on November 5th, which is a Tuesday, which is sort of the tail end of the semester, and you're right in the middle of the school week. How far away? Where do you sleep? Are you in the dorms? Are you on campus or off campus? So we have this layered series of questions that we go through with the students. And we know what they are because we've been doing the same series of questions for years to be able to carry on a one-on-one dialogue with our students. So we just type those up. And then because I tend to be verbose and wordy, our IT people, who tend to be very telescoped and small, took my verbosity and narrowed it down to, easy, like survey speak. And we then linked to every answer, which would take you to the next question, and then ultimately where you needed to go register. And then we were able to disperse that brand new link, which we got renamed to mtsu.edu/vote. And it is pretty much now on every single university webpage. And it is on course registration. It is on every student's homepage inside their online portal. It's on every department. It's on the front page of every college. And it's just been a really smart additional tool. And again, honest to Pete, if it hadn't been for another university who was providing a sort of a carrot and a guidepost for us, it probably might not have been something we would have undertaken. So we thank IU for helping us find a stronger and better pathway to move forward in that regard. So wanted to tell you about that. If you haven't done that, it's something to think about. And I'm just Mary.Evans, EVINS at mtsu.edu. And if you want to shoot me an email at any point in time and ask anything further about that, I would just be more than willing to share about it, because that was just super, super, super critical. But it does require sitting down with the IT department within your university and sort of having a will to make that happen. Another topic that Kathy Copeland asked me to bring up, so I'll move on to this one, is what do we do to get our voter registration numbers up in person? So not that online site. And we have our state of Tennessee Secretary of State has a competition every year among all the universities. Happily, he likes to give out lots of awards, so he breaks them down. But we are a four-year public university, and we win that every year. And the way we win that every year is by literally having students manning voter registration booths out on the sidewalks of campus every single day from the first day of class until the day voter registration closes, which is about a 7-week window. Our voter registration ends in October, and then we're done for the fall. And we ask the Rutherford County Retired Teachers Association and the League of Women Voters and AAUW and Tennesseans for Progress, anybody who wants to come on campus, to take a day, sign up at the Google Doc and pick a day. We open the booth at 8 o'clock in the morning. We tend to close down at 3 in the afternoon. Bring your lunch, bring your water. We'll give you a table and a tent. We'll set you up. We'll train you how to do it. But we got to have conversations with every student. And obviously over and above that, we go into the dorms and we go to every single one of the football teams and the volleyball and the women's volleyball. And we go to the Band of Blue and we go to one of their meetings and we make sure that every kid on that team or that sport is registered. And we obviously work with every faculty member and say, we'll come into every classroom, but we equip every faculty member with the skill sets and the equipment to be able to register students in his or her class with that one-on-one time. So it's backbreaking, exhausting work, but that's why those of us who are called on to do it. So those are my tips, and I'm sure it's not anything that you haven't heard before, but just to let you know, I don't know any other way to get around that other than just do it. So that's what we do. And again, I'd be more than tickled pink to share any of our wisdom if you think it might be useful. So if you got any questions for me, I'll take them, and I'm definitely going to pass on to Kara, because JMU is just a fabulous university. They know what they're doing. We're just flying by the seat of our pants.
Mary, do you pay your students who are doing those voter registration drives for 7 weeks? Is it work study? So they're just volunteers?
Yeah, no, they're just out there to make a difference. And we tried it. We go to the summer presidium. We have 300 student organizations, and they meet in the summer, their presidents and their exec boards, with student affairs. We go to that meeting every year. We say, you know, alpha, beta, tau, you need to sign up for one day to be out there, and you need to be sure every single one of your members is registered to vote. And so we try to get them all involved in the process and to allay their cynicism for a little period of time.
I like that idea. I'm going to steal it. Of getting all of the clubs on campus to do a voter registration.
Oh yeah, they each got to take a day.
A public one. That's really smart. I like that
because
idea.
they all have service requirements. So y'all hanging up. I think I'll send my contact information. I'll put it in the chat as I'm leaving, but I'm passing the baton over to Kara.
Thanks for mentioning that Are You Registered to Vote is not a hook. I think sometimes that initial script is really important. We have an interactive issues board where we ask people what matters to you as a voter, and they can come and click on the thing that matters, and it moves as people say the environment or reproductive rights or but yeah, when you say are you registered to vote, that makes them walk faster.
That's right. It's a blow off question. It just doesn't work. And honestly,
Deborah,
when we say where are you registered to vote, they literally stop because they go, oh, well, mama registered me somewhere. I mean, home. Well, where is home?
Deborah, what is the board that you use to do that? That sounds really interesting.
We use Mentimeter.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it was something like, okay. That's really smart.
We drag a smart board out into the common area, and then they can interact with it, and then it moves, like one is more important than the other depending on who comes over. And I don't know, that little bit of interaction I think is eye-catching, but it is not easy to drag people over to a voter registration table.
We've started using Kahoots when we go into our classroom visits. We have like a Kahoot, and then we have a prize that, the winners of the Kahoot game, it's all based on voting stuff. So I like that idea of gamifying and interacting, but I like the idea of getting a whiteboard and doing a big Mentimeter or something. I like that idea.
Kara, do you want to tell us more
Yeah.
about what JMU is doing?
I'm just here
Mary,
like
thanks so
listening,
much for
taking ideas.
sharing.
So Mary's a hard act to follow. That was fantastic. Now I want to move to Tennessee because all those efforts were truly wonderful. I wanted to talk about something a little bit different than how do we engage our students in voting, and really thinking about what might our responsibilities be to our off-campus community and the community in which we live in. So we have a program at the Madison Center that's called Democracy Beyond Barriers. And I'm really proud of this effort, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart. We've been lucky, and I want to say it up front, that we've been lucky to have an alumni to donate funding that makes this process possible. There we go. And so I have to say, I always have to say that because that's important. But at the Madison Center, which is the office that I work for, is a high profile entity, and we sit under the Office of the President, in which we're incredibly visible on campus, and we're the ones that do all of the campus voting efforts. But really our mission is to educate and inspire people to address public issues and cultivate the common good in our community. And we don't just mean our campus community, but we definitely mean the place in which JMU resides in. What is wonderful about JMU is that we're 20,000 plus students strong, with a student body and student leadership and university leadership that strongly supports voting. We're also a predominantly white institution in a community in which it is not predominantly white. So Harrisonburg is a fairly rural community. We sit about 2-ish hours outside of Washington, D.C., closer to West Virginia than our metropolitan neighbors in Washington, D.C. or Richmond. But Harrisonburg is a sanctuary city. It has a high degree of refugees and immigrants, and especially refugees from different African and Central American countries. And so engaging those residents with questions about how do you vote, what does it mean to be civically engaged, even if, or when you aren't an American citizen in which you can't vote, becomes exceptionally relevant to the office on campus, whose charge it is to help the community be civically and democratically engaged. There we go. And so we're lucky to have a fund that provides a lot of support for this, but really our focus is on these couple of points. That our goal is to expand the electorate, beyond, and thinking not just about our own campus, but thinking about how we can include greater voices from historically marginalized groups on campus, but also in our communities. That has included our Black population, which experienced a high degree of displacement in the 1970s and 1980s. So how do we make sure that those voices have been represented when we talk about difficult issues facing our community, and how those voices are recognized with city council, with county council, and so on. But we also have a responsibility to educate our campus about issues relating to immigration. Immigration is probably like a lot of your other campuses, especially if you are not a PWI campus, is deeply important. Coming from a PWI campus where a lot of students are like, well, I don't know anything about that. I came to college, I don't know. Helping students understand what immigration is about, the difficulties and the positives and sometimes the negatives of immigration, and helping students wrestle with some of those trade-offs, what we can do, what might be difficult, but we should consider, is some of the things that we talk about. We also take as a deep commitment this idea that we should remove barriers to deepen democratic engagement, especially for people who cannot legally vote. And then we do so by a deep sense of collaboration, not for, but with, and in partnership with local immigrant and refugee communities. We don't do this work in isolation or think that we have all the answers, but we do work, and we have worked very hard at making sure that our partnerships, that we're working for those partnerships. So I want to share some of the things that we've done, because I think that these are really interesting. And I don't think in many ways that these are I love them and I love the work that we do. I don't necessarily think these are super groundbreaking efforts, and I don't mean to put them down, but I think that these are collaborations with faculty who are on campus and are already doing this work as a researching scholar, who are already teaching these efforts and getting them out of their classrooms and talking with the campus as a whole. So we do a lot of work with what is called the Scholars Latino Initiative, which is a nonprofit that has a relationship with JMU and JMU faculty, but it helps high school Latino students consider themselves as scholars and ready for college. And so we do a lot of work with them, with our Latin American and Caribbean nations minor program, to do a lot of this kind of work. So with high school students, with college students. And so a couple of years ago, we did an effort called Civic Engagement Beyond Voting and Citizenship, where students in our School of Media Arts and Design a couple of years ago did a documentary on a local high school student who was a DACA student who didn't have and who was not a resident, and her parents weren't residents. Her parents spoke only Spanish. She spoke English, but she was very concerned that she would not get into JMU, that she would not get into college. And how could she better and how could she work to be able to be college ready? And how could she be democratically engaged given these, financial, legal barriers to doing something as basic as our students consider, which is being able to access college? So we showed this film for all of our students. It was a tear jerker, bring the Kleenex, because it brought tears to everybody's eyes. And then we actually brought the student in, her name was Dulce, and she came in and spoke to the students about what happened after the film. She got into JMU, she graduated, she went to do all of these wonderful things. She was she was very active in the community and went to become an activist. And that was wonderful, but that was, almost entirely just a product of knowing people on campus and having relationships with faculty and organizations on campus who are doing this work. We have a whole series of other things that you could read here, but I'll also talk about, we did this lovely program with the German program in which we showed a film whose name I can't remember. The film on White Rose, which talked about, how do we speak up when we see something terrible happening? We like to think that we will, but oftentimes we don't. And so we had this really wonderful student facilitated program where we watched part of the film, we had conversations, we had dinner together, and then we watched more of the film and had more conversations about how do we help each other feel safe? How do we help each other feel brave? How do we make sure that our campus is an open space for everybody? And again, that was largely the German program came to us and said, how can you help us have these conversations? We're lucky in Harrisonburg, and I imagine these kinds of programs exist in your community as well. And they're not, for us, they are, we're welcome at them, and they're not off, they're not out of bounds for us to participate in them. But we have a tent that has our banner and logo on them, and we drag that tent out to community events like our National Immigrants Day event, which our city celebrates, to our Hispanic Heritage Festival. It didn't happen last year, but it will this year, our Immigrant Day, which is a wonderful event in which it is, as you can imagine, everybody piles into our downtown. There's lots of different celebration, food, culture, music, all of the above. And we set up our tent. We bring our purple pocket constitutions. We talk to people about, here's how you can contact the mayor's office, the city manager's office. Here's how you can contact different kinds of services. We try to have somebody on our staff who speaks Spanish that can speak the native language to people, especially if they're English, they don't feel comfortable speaking English to native English speakers. But we go to those events, and sometimes we'll have drawing things. We'll have like a constitution that kids can draw. And kids like that. We bring crayons and we bring candy. But really the idea is that, we're there to also help people not just think about democracy as voting, but to think about democracy as additional, voting as things that are additional to ways that people can engage in democracy. The last event that I'll mention, and then I'm happy to answer any questions or talk with you about how to strengthen these kinds of relationships is we had an event called Testing Your Citizenship Knowledge. We did this in the fall. It went over like gangbusters. Students really loved it and appreciated it. And we did it again in the spring, in which we just had students take the citizenship test with portions of the citizenship test, and asked whether they can pass the citizenship test. And some students, as you can probably imagine, had no idea what these questions even were. Many of them failed. That speaks nothing about our wonderful JMU students, but speaks more to how complex and difficult the citizenship test is. And it speaks to the determination of a lot of our immigrants and refugees who are coming to the United States to be citizens have to go through in order to get their documentation. And that was such a wonderful event. Students really came away from that feeling empowered, like they know something about the conditions and barriers that people who are coming to this country face, that they understand that they have an advantage over others, and that they do come away appreciating the knowledge that they get, their abilities to vote without having to take a citizenship test in order to be able to do something as basic as they consider their like voting. So that was an easy event to put together and is easy to transport to any campus and for any event. We'll do it again in the spring, or it is the spring, in the fall. I think that's but like I said, we do a lot of this work because we feel that it's deeply important, and we try to embed this kind of working beyond barriers in our community in a lot of the different projects that we do. And we take opportunities when our campus has a diversity conference, to do presentations on democracy, to the barriers to participating in democracy, and how we can be civically engaged even if we can't vote. That when we go to our faculty Center for Excellence, who does faculty workshops, we talk with our faculty there about how to talk with students about voting and how to talk with DACA students about being civically engaged. We do a lot of other kinds of events, and you could read here, that really centers the idea of our relationship to our campus is not just telling people how to vote, but is in really thinking holistically, and talking with and encouraging people who are not able to think of different ways, and to help them engage in their community in different ways. And that's it. I love this work, and I think it's deeply important and meaningful. And I'm happy to answer any questions about how you all can take some of this work to your own campuses, or what you're doing on your campus to deepen the connection between your campus and community.
Yeah, if you have any questions or comments for Kara, please just take yourself off of mute.
I had a class this semester where one of our projects, we translated some material into French and Spanish, and created a series of Instagram posts in French and in Spanish about upcoming deadlines. And then we found out you can get a ballot in Spanish here, but not in French. So yeah, so it was interesting. One project leads to another, obviously, when you think about all the barriers when you're working off campus and in pockets of the community where you really are trying to elevate civic engagement, including voting, right? And what access do communities have? What barriers do they think exist, and how to address those, right? So issues of childcare and transportation and documentation, and not understanding early voting, right? And the place of voting is really close to the courthouse, and that doesn't feel safe for a lot of people, right? So, there's another place in the mall, right? So the more you talk to, we have voting in our mall because there's nothing happening in our mall, but now you can vote in our mall. But the more we talk to, right, the more you're out in communities just having these conversations and trying to answer questions, right? There's this ongoing evolution of when we know better, we do better. And we are always having to adapt at the ways we talk to people and what we can provide for them.
I think that's right. I mean, just so well said. Uh, when a few years ago, when Harrisonburg received a large sum of funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, we were able to help City Council think about and engage the public in getting a public engagement process about how do we spend this money. And their directive to us was, don't just, survey the usual folks who come to City Council, but you need to get into the communities and where a lot of our residents who wouldn't normally come out to City Council are, and connect with them. And that meant, right, we had to think very strategically about where we were having these meetings. We had to have transcription service. So if you've ever seen a facilitated process that involves a translator, like I wasn't a part of it. I just watched it, but I was exhausted just watching it. And then right, and childcare, and and for us it was even thinking about who are the leaders of those communities that we can get buy-in from, because otherwise we were going to struggle getting buy-in. And so yeah, it's tough. It's not easy, but it's important.
And it's hard for, I will stop talking if others want to jump in, sorry, but it's sometimes difficult for us. We're a small private institution, right? Going into marginalized communities, and we look very much like outsiders, right? And that's not who you want. Try, like my students are really eager, but right, you have to engage people from those communities to really be the champions out front for this work. And we can equip them with materials that they might need, but we're not always the best people on the front line, no matter how eager we are to do the work. Yeah. So that, that alone is an interesting lesson for students, but trying to get into communities to build trust and to get people not only to register, but also to vote. Yeah. It's harder to do than I think students realize.
That's right. And how many of our own students struggle with voting, and just it being an overwhelming process for first-time student voters. I can only imagine if English is not your native language, going to a polling location and the ballot maybe is in your native language, maybe it's not, and even just thinking of voting and how the process works could be extremely intimidating.
Yeah.
And how do you solve that? How do you solve that problem, or how do you reduce that kind of that barrier?
We do a lot of work in low income neighborhoods, right? Where people work 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, go to school, right? And so talking about early voting, like you don't have to do it on the day, right? The idea of early voting is really important. And then we're also in high renter concentration neighborhoods, so people don't even know what ward they live in, right? So even for local things or school districts, right? Like it's a presidential election, so it's a good opportunity for us to talk about these things, but elections happen all the time. I mean, we've had elections here get, 11 votes once decided the mayor. So, that's 11 votes.
Exactly.
Trying to, it's not just about electing the president, it's about electing a lot of people who have a really big impact on your everyday life.
Yeah.
Changing our messages to meet different pockets of communities, I think, is one of our ongoing challenges.
Yeah, we just put in a grant to get we have campus vote t-shirts, but that say JMU students vote. We're changing some of that language, and we're going to print t-shirts that are entirely in Spanish to do that. So we'll wear them, we'll hand them out. That's a small thing, and we hope that at least it normalizes this kind of relationship and the ideas of this. But it's it's difficult work, and it's necessary. And I think where we are, if anything, our limitation is that it has been to, the majority of refugees and immigrants in our community are Hispanic speaking or Spanish speaking. But we have a growing population of immigrants from Muslim nations, from the Middle East and so on. And we have not done a very good job at reaching out to those groups. But I think that as we think holistically, we have to think about like, how do we translate into Kurdish? How do we translate into a variety of different languages and not just be thinking of just one population? But we'll save that one for next year.
Well, and Kara, I'm thinking about, you mentioned this a little bit, and I'm sorry for having an inarticulate question, but that connection between sort of voting, but also civic engagement that is bigger than voting, especially for immigrant communities where you may not be eligible to vote. So I'm wondering if you could, talk a little bit more on how you're thinking about that, if that makes at all any sense.
No, I mean, we do, and we try to do a lot of work with, well, let me back up. I think it's important to figure out who those network leaders are in those communities, and sometimes even out of those communities. So our city manager's office and folks in our city manager's office run a program, or at least have had some relationship with a program called Welcoming Harrisonburg, which takes leaders and representatives from all of the different immigrant refugee populations in our community and gets them together so that they can have a conversation themselves about how do we become this kind of inclusive, broad community. And we've been lucky to be plugged into that at times and to have a role in having some of those conversations, and where we talk about, yes, here's how you vote and here's materials, but also here's the importance of talking with the city manager's office, here's the importance of talking and coming to events that the mayor holds and talking with the mayor, who is extremely approachable, has more than 11 votes, but is extremely approachable, and when there's an opportunity to have your voice be a part of a larger conversation, like when Harrisonburg received ARPA funds, to be a part of those, because we're lucky in that our city council wanted to take into account, wanted to recognize the importance of those voices, and didn't give them short shrift. So I think it's easy to say, and hopefully in political science that building trust is deeply important, and so getting those people to turn out, but then having their voices actually be reflected back in what city council and what local government does and what city manager's office do, what our campus does, is important. And that's what builds these kinds of reciprocal relationships that can facilitate this kind of work happening. I think that was a fairly inarticulate answer to your question, Ellen. I'll raise you one.
Kara. But it's always that I think the even if you're thinking about effects and ways that you're sort of measuring things, sometimes we get easy to gather some data on voter turnout, and maybe a little more difficult to gather how to what effects did we have in these broader ways, and do people feel like their voices are heard, even if they're not in a space that they can be a voter, but are yet a resident and concerned with what might be happening.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments in these last few minutes for Kara? I'm gonna drop into chat a link to an evaluation for the workshop, so if you want to click on it and have it open to fill out later, that will be terrific. Kara, what are you most excited by in the work right now?
I okay. So this is probably not the answer you want, but I really love that we can go to all of these different festivals because the food is amazing. And that's the deeply honest answer. And I know this is recorded, so you'll get the deeply honest answer from me. But I love because I bring my own kids, they get to play, get good food. But I truly love being off campus and being in those spaces and having people come up and say, you know, and sometimes they'll say it in Spanish or another language and say, what is this all about? And then we get to share what are we thinking, you know, about democracy, why it's important, and we get to, you know, hand them a pocket constitution and say, okay, you're probably not going to read this, but you know, but this says, you know, here's the foundations of a, you know, of a functioning democracy, and this is important. So here, go vote too, if you can. So I enjoy being out in the community. I think we have the summer and the fall is when all of those events happen. So I'm particularly excited for those things. They give good energy.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna share my screen again just to show the next two workshops and our final two workshops of this series coming up on Friday. I'm talking about incorporating voter issues into the classroom. You know, really, you know, how do we have these difficult conversations around climate change or gun rights, or any of the other myriad conversations that we need to have in a healthy democracy. And I think it will prove to be a good workshop. And then a week from today is our final workshop in the series, where we'll be learning practical strategies to mitigate conflict and maintain community as we find ways that we can help our students engage constructively across lines of difference on our campus. And then again, I've just put in that CLDE meeting in Detroit. I think it will be a great time in Detroit. Detroit is lovely in June, I'm told. And I hope that you all can join us there, and hope that you all have a lovely week this week. And that I hope to see you in a future workshop. Thank you, Kara, for all of the work that you do.